My man, Mr. Ken Van Liew. Where are you? Live in New York? New Jersey? Where are we
I live in
at?
Jersey, but yeah, like right outside of New York.
Right outside New
Been
York.
there every
Okay.
day. Yeah,
Love it.
but
Yeah, I was
live
born
from New
in
York. Absolutely.
live from New York. I love it. Yeah, I was born in Trenton, New Jersey, but came to Baltimore suburb area when I was like 3 or 4. Lived there my whole life pretty much.
Yeah, I owned a bunch of. I used to work Mercer County every week. Yeah, I had a
Mhm.
couple pieces of property in Trenton.
Yep, that's where I entered Mercer County. Talking
Yep,
to
yep.
talking to some solid Mid Atlantic guys. But excited to have you on the show, man. Excited I got to meet you a few months ago at the Family Mastermind. Get introduced to you a little bit there, see what you're doing. That's where I originally heard about flipping New Jersey, flipping USA, doing a bunch of stuff with other people's money. Primarily a developer now, but pretty much doing almost everything in the real estate game and across all different type of asset classes. So this is an exciting interview for me to pick someone's brain, not only on mindset, but just like how you go from single family real estate to all these different asset classes and skyscrapers and getting people to come film you in New York for documentaries, which we may touch on. But would love to hear you in your own words, Ken. And want to thank you for coming on the show. Everything you have going on now with real estate, and we'll kind of talk about how you built and scaled yourself into all these different asset classes.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here and to give value to the listeners. And we're real excited because I joke and I tell people that my overnight success only took 33 years,
Mm-hmm.
256 days, 17 hours, and 13 minutes. But yes, we were selected for the Dennis Quaid Viewpoint Project. We're creating a documentary, Real Estate Today, Keys to Investing. They're coming to New York City to film the $1 billion project we did in Brooklyn, New York, and a couple other skyscrapers. And real excited about that. But the one thing I always like to say is, you know, how do we break it down so the everyday person can get started? And I know you mentioned a couple times, how to get started. I started very unusual. I started from the top down, I guess you could say, no pun intended, and
Mm-hmm.
today, we're doing mixed use development, which encapsulates every market sector. We have literally a CVS pharmacy on one of our projects, affordable and market rate housing, commercial office. We have restaurants, hotels, self storage, flex office, residential flats, townhomes. So different types of residential. And I found that in the pivot that I had to make in the last year, where New York City became very peculiar,
Mm-hmm.
a lot different. I took the approach. I would joke. I said, I'm going to start building skyscrapers horizontally now. So, we picked up like close to 50 acres in New Jersey. We have another 45 acres in North Carolina. So we're doing mixed use development throughout the country.
Amazing, man. One thing that you're good at explaining, and I want you to hit on, we're going to talk about your story, but just simplifying real estate for like, I forget the term that you used, but instead of making it this 20,000 pound gorilla, making it like the size of like a young chimpanzee, like simplifying it and kind of
Yeah.
taking out like
Yeah.
I guess for lack of a better term, like scary aspects out of that when we're talking skyscrapers and buying 50 acres at a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and this is coming right from a guy that was pretty confused. I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed in high school. I basically made it because I was an all-state football player. But when I went to college, I created the 6-year plan. Met my wife taking Calc 2 for the third time. Finally, ended up going to NJIT and um when I got into real estate, I knew how to build projects and I became really good at building, but I didn't know anything about real estate. I knew I had a job, I was building for other people, and I had a 6-figure debt. So I was like, this is not going in the right direction. I'm building these really tall $100 million buildings and I'm the one in debt. So
Mhm.
there was no mathematical I guess connection there for me. It was very incongruent. So I figured out, how do I take this? I called it top down experience and figure out how to do my first deal. And since I knew how to build, my first project was a $17 million assisted living that I was able to pay myself some fees. So I came out of the box. And then years later, I kind of took my formula that I did on that project and applied it to fixing and flipping. And, Flipping USA was, not many years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago, where we proved that out. So, so that's kind of what we're doing and how we've made it applicable. But to answer your question, I don't want to hijack the call here. I want to
No, this is all
say
you, man.
something.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, I broke it down just to keep it simple, because when I went into real estate, and we talked a little bit about it, you have like the CRM, you're like data machine. Like when I started, there was classified ad papers. I don't even know if you know what that is,
Mhm.
but you look in the back of the newspaper and you see what properties were for sale. And that's how I learned how to find real estate. And then when I got into construction, I learned how to call architects and engineers, go, hey, what's on the drawing board? Like, what do you got coming out? And I found my first project through that source. But as I learned how other people found projects, I put together what I believe is a very, very, positively proven system that finds real estate. So I break real estate down. You got to find it, you have to fund it, and you have to facilitate it. So, I teach how to find, and then there's all types of funding, unlimited funding. So we get a little bit into the funding aspect, and then facilitating, which I've turned into an expert over the years, because as you develop a project, you realize, wow, developing real estate actually includes every aspect of real estate. You have to buy something, you have to get the financing, you got to figure out what's the floor plan, how are people going to live, how you're going to lease it. It's really like doing almost a multi-family acquisition. So I find that breaking it down into those three components, it enables me to teach people that think they're trying to either put their arm around a 1,200-pound gorilla or trying to eat an elephant, saying like, okay, guys, the gorilla can be as big as it is. Let's just break it down. Like, how do you find your first deal? How do you fund your first deal? How do you facilitate your first deal? Let's just take one bite of the elephant at a time. If you want to specialize in something, we've always talked about mentorship, reach out and get a mentor. Tony Robbins was my mentor in life. He taught me a lot of personal aspects, and real estate. A lot of the people that were my mentors, you never heard of. You go to these masterminds, like, oh, Ron LeGrand's my mentor and Lou Brown's my mentor. My mentors were people like John Norris, who built Olympia, built Olympia, York. He built Canary Wharf in London. It was the largest project in London. He came to New York. He built Battery Park, the largest project, I think it was in the country at that time. Yeah. So these were my mentors that would say, okay, meet me on the job site tomorrow at 6:00, Ken. We're going to walk the job. I'm like, okay, John, I'll be there at 6:00 with bells and whistles on. And that's how it started,
Mm-hmm. What do you think is what are like some of the biggest things you learned from Tony Robbins personally, as far as like your own mental operating system? And then I want to hear a little bit about the bounce back, because I know that you were at a Tony Robbins event when you had some issues with properties of your own pop up.
Yeah. I think the biggest aspect that I got out of Tony Robbins, if I were to say the one takeaway, is he has a program called The Time of Your Life. And essentially what it is in a nutshell is it's chunking things down. I don't know if you're like I can only imagine, I used to go get the legal pad so that I could put more things to do on one page, and after about 4 pages, I'd be like, oh, now where do I start? And I remember Tony going, hey, you got to learn how to do 20% of the things and get 80% of the results. And then, this time of your life thing taught you to turn your head into a bureau. I would think it was like, okay, this is like my bureau where all my clothes are, but instead of my clothes, it's going to have business in the top level and spirituality in the second drawer and health and fitness in the third drawer. And as I looked at that list of 400 things, I was able to chunk it down into 8 categories. And then looking at those 8 categories, of each 8 categories had 20 items, then I'd realize what 20% of those 20 items would give me 80% of the results in that category, whether it be in spirituality or whether it be health and fitness. When I was at that Tony Robbins event, I weighed 246 pounds. The towers collapsed. I lost my best friend, lost about $500,000, and then decided to lose an 80-pound blanket. So today I weigh 168 pounds. I'm in the best shape of my life. And, it all started when I was with Tony that day in Life Mastery in Hawaii when the World Trade Center collapsed.
Wow, man. That is absolutely wild. It's crazy that so many people that are at the top of success in life have some pretty drastic downfalls or just like down moments in their life that they overcome. And it's like, the inverse is true too. Like people that win the lottery but aren't mentally wired for it. Like I forget the percentage of like 90 something percent of them end up going bankrupt within like a year or something crazy like that. So it's crazy, man. Like this is the 80/20 real estate show, because we talk about that principle and like what are the biggest leverage points. And I always speak to the biggest leverage point overall in life is mastering mindset and being able to work on it consistently every day to help you. And obviously it served
Oh yeah.
you pretty darn well here through your real estate career, Ken.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've had to, pretty much screw my head on straight every day. So, it's just a constant, uh, thinking it through, having, which sometimes it's hard, when you start at a young age, running skyscrapers and managing 600 people plus, you're just telling people what to do all the time, and, that mindset that you could just tell people what to do all the time doesn't work. So then when things, the old fashioned way, my mentors were like, you could scream and yell once in a while. Like, you can't really scream and yell anymore. It's a whole different society. You have to be able to influence, and you have to be able to enroll people. You have to be able to have a dialectic view. You have to allow people to see your vision and almost allow them to think it's their idea. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to get to the outcome, you have to take whatever steps necessary to reduce friction to get to where you want to go. Everything has friction, and you could be trying to push something across, sandpaper, or you could be trying to push it across ice, and whatever your friction coefficient is going to determine how easy you get to your outcome.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the main points for your business model with flipping New Jersey and flipping USA, using other people's money to scale with less friction, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was the flipping USA, flipping NJ. I created that on my first project. It was a 113 bed assisted living. It was a $17 million project that I did with other people's money and other people's experience. Flipping USA was purely for me to test that my formula worked for residential, because I was tired of listening to all the gurus say you can do wholesaling without any money. Yes, you can. But if you want to do 137 wholesale deals in 1 year, you better have a lot of your own money.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I came into flipping USA. I put the system, like I was telling you, how we could find more deals, fund more deals, and facilitate more deals, where initially flipping NJ, which was the original parent company, was just doing wholesaling. I would say, guys, you should wholesale some of the properties to yourself, capture the first level of revenue, and then do a fix and flip. Don't take them all, because you can't, be dissing all of our buyers, but create a second stream of revenue. So it was really a testing ground. And, and I know you mentioned earlier, I know there's some bios out there that are confusing, but I never did residential or stick building until after I pretty much, made very well in New York. And then in 2000, after 2008, when I just decided to kind of do some other stuff, that's when I started doing the residential in New Jersey. And my first residential project, stick bill, was 52 condo units at Union train station next to Keene University, which was one of the first transit villages in New Jersey, because it was a direct line to New York City. So that's just, kind of telling you how it formed. It was kind of a reverse down, top down thinking, where, I took the skyscraper mentality, did a $17 million project, and then kind of figured out how someone could take what I learned building skyscrapers and apply it to an everyday residential transaction. And that's where I believe now that we provide, a full spectrum of educational behind the whole development business. And that's part of, I believe, why the Dennis Quaid Viewpoint Project contacted us, because of, the educational component behind our real estate development business.
And I was laughing with Ken's small world kind of fact here. Our buddy that's visiting, Fernando Angelucci's visiting Miami, and he was just filming for the same documentary in Fort Lauderdale earlier today. So it's just kind of funny how it's a small world there. But you have a very, very interesting journey, like the opposite of most people, for sure. But I've always heard you speak about the importance of having systems and processes. How much of that is like trial and error, like making your own systems and processes, versus finding either coaching or education like you have going on? And what's the best way to get linked to that? I'll have it in the show notes, but just for people listening to this live to check you out.
Yeah. 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 I think, I mean, you know, a lot of my systems that I've derived, I guess, in real estate all came from my construction background and engineering background. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and education wise, I studied as a civil engineer, which I guess is the nerd side of me because I like running around and having fun, and all that kind of stuff. But, so I was very numbers orientated. So, when we would develop these 100 million, projects, I was very start from the budget, how to buy it, how to schedule it, how to manage it on a daily basis. And all of those systems that I was using to build these $100 million buildings, 100,000 square foot projects, I kind of took little parts and pieces of it and then, created some of the systems around find, fun, and facilitate. And, I guess I would say they're kind of like my own systems. They're different than the stuff out there, but I'm not saying that the systems out there don't work. They have data systems out there that, people, they get data, they do mailers, they find people that want to sell houses. I never did it that way. I was more of like a relationship guy. Like I used to get those classified ad papers and I would call the deals and I knew I couldn't buy just to talk to the guy to ask him like, hey, do you know anybody and that's how I established relationships, and one call led to another. And, today I don't really look for deals. They kind of just come to me, and, it's interesting, but, I may have went on a tangent there because we got so many, good things we're talking about here.
Yeah, amazing stuff, man. I love it. And I mean, that's something everybody can do. And I like how you phrase it too, of calling, a deal that you may not potentially get, asking if there's other leads. It's kind of like a mindset of doing whatever it takes, talking whatever it has, talking to whoever needs to be talked to, taking calc three times, taking calculus a few times to find another, long-term, lifetime deal. But I think that speaks to anybody that's listening to this of just quality conversations and be open to, thinking that you can attract these deals to you. Like I'm probably going to clip that line that Ken said, like, I don't really look for deals, like deals just come to me. And I think that has a lot to do with mindset, but also just a foundational, almost like guerrilla marketing of yourself and networking.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going to give you one trick because I've done it so many times, but I recognized it in my last raise where I call it a micro distinction because I literally raised $3.7 million on one phone call. And I noticed that, and I don't know if it's a result of COVID but people need to be like understood and heard more, I think,
Mm-hmm.
now more than ever. And I noticed that with people, I listen for for transformation with people, and I noticed that I forgot the exact point that I was going to make. I always do that because I go into like 5 different tangents here. Bring me back to the topic that you wanted me to answer there.
Well, we were kind of talking about like mindset of your like, because you've done so much foundational work and just like networking that you don't even really need to look for deals. Deals come to you.
Oh, I got it. Deep emotional rapport and merging ecosystems. So
Mm-hmm.
what I noticed that my difference when I get on a phone call, where normally before when I was raising money, it was like all about business. So the one difference that I started to make during COVID is I would say that I improved my compassion and empathy. And I was listening for what people were like dealing with. And in that, I learned how to create a deeper emotional rapport. And if I was literally talking to somebody and I was like, oh, wow, your son's sick and how he's doing. And, oh, you have children? Oh, how many kids you have? And the next thing you know, I'm talking about their kids. And the person's telling me like, yeah, Friday, I got whatever. But, and they start telling you about what their kids are doing or what. When you're having a conversation with someone about what's really important to them, a whole new realm of possibility opens up for you. I mean, it's crazy because they're then interested in what they can do to help you. And when
Mm-hmm.
I started talking to people where I guess I would say a higher level of compassion, empathy, listening for what's important to them, what they really care about, and then leaning in to those things and spending a little bit more time, almost following what I call is the 1/3, 2/3 rule, where if they're not talking at least 2/3 at a time, telling you about what's really important to them, then you're not on the right track for the outcome you want. You may get it, but you're going to get it so much faster when you have a deep emotional rapport. And the other thing I learned, and thank you for bringing me back on track, so many things race through my mind, is the merging of ecosystems is so important. And what do I mean by that? So, my whole life I used to hear about this like 6 degrees of separation, and you'd go, and you might do it as a young man. My dad never told me, but I heard one time, save everybody's phone number, build a Rolodex, and it was always this thing. I want to meet everybody, and then all of a sudden the 6 degrees of separation goes into 2 degrees of separation, and everybody, but you don't have the deep emotional rapport with only but a handful. And that's where happiness and fulfillment and tons of money come in place. When you really, vertically innovate with the important people in your life. And that's a little thing that I learned over the last couple of years, really those micro distinctions that make a huge difference.
I mean, and that's just humans 101 is like we're animals based off of like emotions, thoughts, and feelings. So like it is kind of wild to hear it, but I mean that is as about foundational 80/20 as you can go. So if you already have like, your civil engineer background, plus all the sales, negotiation, marketing that you've learned, plus adding on this other element, which I think COVID is like kind of magnifying human consciousness, or like just humans being more open to talking about like emotions and understanding those. I mean, that's killer advice, guys, of not doing it, it's ethical and genuine, but that's really just how people operate. Like if you want to be better at connecting with people, you should figure out like what they're thinking, what they're feeling, asking about them. And that's sales 101, or like, conversation 101 is you should be trying to have them talk 70%, whoever you're engaging with.
Yeah. And I agree. And, the funny thing is, I was never a great salesman till one day I realized, I'm actually selling all the time. So I never really developed any sales skills. And, in New York, you're swimming with sharks all the time. You're not sitting around, talking a lot, especially when you're building skyscrapers. It's like a real cutthroat, it's just like, push 24/7, but, sometimes, even the best people in the world, you miss things in life, so, whether I didn't recognize it, even though I know everybody and I have a lot of rapport with most people. I recognize that, just in my, and how, like you said, the 101 applies for an advanced course where I'm raising millions of dollars. Just bring that 101 foundational sales training in, and you could raise millions of dollars.
One thing for me, I've wanted the last couple of years, it's been like on the top of my mind of like, man, I want to have a CRM or like a digital Rolodex, essentially, like your dad would say, of like all the relationships in my life, personal, business, things like that. It's interesting to hear you, what's the expression, like a mile or an inch wide, but a mile deep. Like that's almost how you see it with relationships, which I totally agree with. Like, but it's interesting seeing both perspectives, like trying to build as big of a network as possible, like as many people as possible, or just going smaller circle, really, really deep. So like, and that starts with providing value, I'm sure, right? Like that's the best way to network is like you're going to them, just providing value, helping them out, hearing them out, just talking life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I'm not saying there's any right answer, but I agree. I just found that, I thought that going wide, was gonna, maybe, I'm not saying it wasn't beneficial. I mean, I could say I know a lot of people, but I'm just saying my fulfillment in life, which, really comes down to, you hear Tony Robbins talk about, you got to serve all 6 human needs. Your fulfillment really comes when you're growing and you're contributing back, and, when you have all the certainty and uncertainty and love and connection and significance, and that's when you're really happy. And I just noticed it that it's those, deeper relationships that when you're working with people you like hanging out with, they're into, common things. And, and I just spent a lot of time horizontally, versus where vertically. I'm not saying you're not going to eventually get horizontal, but it's really comes down to what do you want in life,
Hmm.
it's great to know everybody, so,
Hmm.
we'll just, I'm here now for a little bit different purpose. Years ago, I think it was a lot more about me, and I had to, what I call is ego subrogation, big time. You got to get, rid of the ego and realize, what you don't know. And, you start to accelerate, you learn where you should push and where you need to, eliminate, delegate, and automate, right? Because if you want to become an owner of your business, you got to be able to, step out of the operations. And that's done by building leadership and having the right mindset and getting rid of the ego and being a control fanatic. Like I'm still am, so.
Yeah, nobody's perfect, and that's always a good topic to kind of hit on, like ego. I was thinking about it last night with social media, actually. Just this day and age, which I see it going more and more of social media, and everybody pretty much has the ability to like publish themselves like a news station, essentially, with Facebook and Instagram. Like you can make posts, and you're pretty much your
Yeah.
own, media outlet to a certain extent. And you can even, and that's even been automated and delegated where people have agencies and people working for them just doing all the work. So Ken can focus on real estate and education, everything he's got going on, and people could be promoting his stuff. But that's an interesting point to hit on too, just like automating, delegating, which I guess starts step one with awareness and some type of trial and error of actually doing the business and working through and seeing what your strengths are, what you enjoy doing, what's fulfilling to you. And then once you have that awareness of everything that's going on in your business, figuring out what's the least enjoyable slash lowest leverage points, smallest leverage points that you could be doing. I mean, it's hard for me to think about it with skyscrapers. I even have a little bit of that 20,000 pound gorilla, even thinking about skyscrapers and things like that. But yeah, interesting to be talking to Ken today just about that, just because it's not a typical guest, I would say, as far as asset classes working on.
I love it. I love it. But it's just another day in paradise,
Yeah.
whatever approach you take, I always tell people failure doesn't exist. Most of the time, everything filters back to the two primary fears. I'm going to fail and I'm not enough. If you feel like you're not enough, that means you're lacking some type of knowledge or mentorship or support system behind you. And if you believe that failure doesn't exist, it's a matter of changing your approach, until it works. You'll get what you want.
Love it, man. That's one of the most powerful clips of this entire interview. I love it. For your perspective, I'd love to hear, to kind of put a bow on this thing, start wrapping this thing up. Your perspective on where the real estate market is now and where it's heading for those that are listening, doing a lot of single
Yeah.
family stuff
Yeah.
right now. And I'm hearing New York is opening up a little bit as far as COVID stuff. Is that something, some true information I'm getting? I was at a Nets Lakers game a couple months ago up there, just having to show vaccine cards, and stuff seemed to be opening up a little bit, but definitely not like New York back in the day.
Yeah, it's actually, I was just there this past weekend, or actually 2 weeks ago to see my daughter lives in Upper New York. But yeah, I was shocked. I didn't need my card. We didn't have to wear a mask, and it is opening back up, so New York will come back. I think, New York is different than any market. It was funny. I was asked today, who's moving back into the high rises. I said, nobody. Most of the people that have those high rise apartments, have another place somewhere else,
Mhm.
and most of
In
them stay in the
Miami.
city, and haven't come back yet. So, and the commercial, no one knows exactly what's going to happen because companies are still kind of figuring out,
Mhm.
what's the best platform for the employees. And, that will continue to tell I think this COVID blanket, comes upon off of us. But from the perspective of, national real estate, in my opinion, and it's interesting living around, the biggest city in the country, that the real estate markets in the metropolitan areas have never, jumped at this acceleration. In the bidding wars that I heard about, it was funny because my friend Sean Quinn, he's the son of the famous actor Anthony Quinn, sent something out the other day that it's like one deal for 35 buyers, and the market is such a frenzy, from that perspective. So people are like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And yes, everything's being escalated, but we also know that because of COVID and because people are out of work, there's going to be another frenzy and fallout, millions of foreclosures again. So once that occurs, in my opinion, with inflation and interest rates going up, we're going to have an adjustment. I don't think there's going to be, what I consider a collapse in 2008, but there will be an adjustment, which is, I think, going to further, escalate the foreclosure. Because, if you're bidding $100,000 more for a house and there's one little glitch, it's going to drop below what you paid for it. And unless you put a lot of equity down, you may be upside down. So like anything else, nothing's really changed in the sense, you're going to get the same outcome if you push the envelope that we've happened in every cycle. Like I said, but I don't think this is going to be, a crash like in 2008. There'll be some upset. I think what we're really going to happen over the next 2 years is going to be the fallout from COVID, and then, we'll try to kind of figure out what's really happening. But the retail sector is really, I believe, getting disrupted by the internet. It was further disrupted by COVID. It continued to struggle. I don't know, like one restaurant owner that's actually making money these days. It's just a brutal business. But I was talking to people today about, repositioning strip malls into actually, destinations and affordable housing and things like that. So there's going to be a lot of creativity out there. I think like anything else, I've been through a few of them. We'll have another cycle. I don't think that this is going to be one of the worst, but that's my take on it. I think that there's such, it's public information. I mean, there's 4 million residential shortage right now in the market. So there's such a great demand. And I think that's one of the big reasons that's going to keep it from, adjusting more than what a lot of people may be afraid of right now.
Love that take. Love that take. Absolutely, man. Well, this has been a fun interview, Ken. I definitely want to hear where people can reach out to you, follow you, and I'll have it in the show notes. Anything you want to end on? This has been an awesome conversation for sure. Very enjoyable.
Yeah. I always give everybody my 11millionairesecrets.com. It's essentially the 11 things I figured out after, earning $1 million on my first deal. And that's 11millionairesecrets.com. KenVanLiew.com is my website. If someone ever wants to talk to me, you go there and click on Discover Now. You could actually set a 45-minute free complimentary planning session with me where we just shoot the breeze and figure out how I leave you with tremendous value. And then if you want my book, KenVanLiew.com/free book, or just go to my website and pay for shipping, or it's available in Audible or, however you want it, but you could just Google me. I'm all over the place. And I think people are finally starting to get to know who I am. And that's a good thing, because if they don't know who I am, I can't give them any value.
Yeah, 100%. Spoken like Grant Cardone is a similar quote. And that's awesome, man. Happy to be a vessel for you in some amount. Getting you on the InvestorFuse podcast was fun.
No, likewise. Thank you so much.
Awesome, man. My pleasure.